I want to present a very short overview of shared reading and why it is so important in the early childhood classroom. Here we have a definition of shared reading. The concept has been around since the late 70s, and basically what we do is we make a book into a big book that we can read with the whole class. So it's very similar to that lap reading that the child may have experienced at home. There are a number of big books out there, and I just want to point out what you'll need and how you can go about creating this experience for your children. First of all, the books that are in big book format are ones that are perfect for shared reading. The illustrations vibrantly support the text. The text is very predictable. It invites children to read along with you. There are amazing authors, Joy Cowley, who wrote Mrs. Wishy-Washy, and Eric Carle, Bill Martin, all have taken their craft to the level where we can teach from one book all week long. Because the books are so large, you will need an easel to support the big book. You can't hold it in your hand and read sideways like you would with a regular trade book. And an important part of shared reading is some kind of pointer so that you can pinpoint the words. And you'll want to tap each word with the pointer as you're reading it. Think about all the phonemic awareness and knowledge of print that is evident in such a practice. And if a word has 2 syllables, you would tap it 2 times as you were reading that word. Now, I talked earlier about you could teach from a big book all week long. And indeed, if the book is rich enough, the children will become so engaged in it and there's so much to do with it, they will come to know that book so well that that transfer of their language to the words on the page becomes very natural. They're very engaged in the reading. So we read it way more than one time. And the first time we read it would be at the beginning of the week, and you would introduce the book and talk about predictions. And I will be sharing some before reading activities with you. After the book is read the first time and every time after, please give your students lots of time to talk about the book. Try not to direct questions during that conversation time. Let the children talk about what they really think and about what they really thought was going to happen and what they found was interesting. It may be very different than what you found interesting. So when we're reading this book all week long, we can teach concepts of print. We can talk about word boundaries. We can talk about word skills. We can talk about book directionality. We can talk about letters of the alphabet. Tons of ways to use these big books. So we're going to divide it into what you can do before you read the book, what you can do during the book, and what you can do after the book. Here we have an example of one of my very favorite big books, The Jiggery by Joy Cowley. And before I even let my students see the cover of this book, I would tell them that this story is called The Jiggery, and I would ask them to predict what a jiggery was. And they would come up with all kinds of wonderful ideas. And then I would show them the cover, and I'd say, now what do you think a jiggery is? And they're still not sure, because we have a toy and a doll and a spaceman and a shovel and a dragon and a volcano. They still don't know what a jiggery is, and they're very interested in finding out what a jiggery is. So obviously the cover is going to give you lots to talk about. Predicting will give you some comprehension work. Book skills can be taught. And one of the things that a very effective way that we can develop vocabulary is by doing what we call a picture walk. And so in the book, The Jiggery, Actually, the jiggery is the kind of dinosaur creature that's out of space that's behind the spaceman in this picture. And the jiggery does all kinds of things. The jiggery goes skating, the jiggery goes riding on a bicycle, the jiggery goes dancing. And those are words that maybe the children would not know. So before I read the book, I'd say, what do you think the jiggery's doing on this page? And let's say it was the skating page. The text would say, I can see a jiggery, it is skating after me. Skating here, skating there, jiggery skate everywhere. Skates are often a new concept for children, especially in Arizona, and so that would be a perfect opportunity to give them that language. What is on the jiggery's feet? What is he doing on that slippery surface? So we need to give them the vocabulary words that they need to enjoy the book before we start through a picture walk. Now, during the reading, you'll want to read the book with good expression, and we talked earlier about how the pointer can help isolate important features of the print, and we want to encourage children to chime in, to read along with us, and good books will invite the children. I can never get through the jiggery even one time without the children already picking up the pattern and being wanting to be part of the reading experience. Then during center time, they can take the pointer and point to each word as they're reading the jiggery. Here's another example of something you can do during the reading. This little girl has it looks like a bubble, one of those wands that you use to blow bubbles. And she's coming up, the teacher has asked her to come up and circle an identified word with that wand. So you may have children point to initial consonant sounds. You may have children identify sight words. Punctuation is very interesting, especially in a big book, because you can see it. Lots of things that you can do during the reading. And then after the reading is when the fun part comes. This is where your dramatic play box that you created would be a perfect way to extend the story. We can engage children in conversations about their favorite part. We can ask them who they liked, who was their favorite character, the plot. And we need to use these literacy words with young children so they develop that kind of vocabulary. It's not just the pictures, it is the illustration. And here we've got an example of comparing a book about insects to a book about spiders with a Venn diagram, how they're the same, they're both small, they both lay eggs, and they both crawl, but they have parts that are very different. There's a myriad of after-reading extensions that are the joy of teaching early childhood literacy.